Hello, it's Richard Wilson, and welcome to this short video module on global capital raising. Lately I've been speaking at a lot of international conferences and doing a lot of video recordings for trainings for our websites in different places. Today I'm shooting this video in downtown Madrid, Spain. I was recently in Singapore and Tokyo, and I'm going to Hong Kong and London and a few other countries later this year. I want to record this video to share with you what I'm learning about raising capital around the world in different places, different cultures, in different regulatory environments, and kind of share some best practices that I've been learning about. So first off, why is it important? I think that global capital raising has become more and more important, yet it's very confusing for somebody who's only raised capital, say in Europe, or in Hong Kong, Singapore, or the United States. And so I hope that the advice I give you is going to help you focus your efforts and your energy on where you can raise the most capital in the least amount of time. One thing that I've learned is that there's three things you should look for while raising capital. Three synergies that you should look for. There are hundreds of countries, literally, where there's people rich enough to invest in hedge funds. But really, if you narrow it down, there's only 1 dozen or 2 dozen countries where people actually know what hedge funds are and commonly are starting to invest in them. If you take those few dozen and you narrow it down based on these three synergies that I tell you about, it really will narrow down the amount of countries you want to raise capital from to just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 countries at most. So I hope this kind of framework will help you look at the whole world and really narrow down to where you can raise capital most effectively for your hedge fund or investment strategy, or whatever you're raising capital for, maybe an investment bank or something else. Now the first synergy is geographical. If you're based in London, it's going to be easier to raise capital in the Middle East, in Monaco, in Luxembourg, in Geneva, than it's going to be for someone based in San Diego, California, or Tokyo. So where you're raising capital from is something very important to consider. If you're based in London and you want to raise capital in Australia or South Africa or somewhere else, that's still doable. But if you're going to raise capital from 3 different countries, they better be very close to each other, all in the Middle East or all in Europe. Because if you choose countries in different parts of the world, you're going to lose synergy in terms of cultural references, relationships those people have. If you have an investor you're working with in Australia, they're more likely to have investor contacts based in Singapore than they are in South Africa or Dubai. So you have to think about geographical locations where you're raising capital from and choose some that are in the same region of the world. If you're going to raise capital in more than one country besides where you're based, make sure they're close to each other. That's pretty common sense. One other thing another synergy is regulatory. To learn all of the regulations, say in a country such as Hong Kong, take some research, and what you'll find is that other countries close by may have similar regulatory environments. Sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes countries such as Bermuda or Singapore have inherited a lot of British law and British rules. So if you're familiar with raising capital in London, there's going to be some regulatory synergies possibly with raising capital in places like Singapore, Bermuda, or other places that used to be British colonies. That's something to consider, is the regulatory synergies in raising capital around the globe. The third thing you should consider is language. While some countries such as China force students to learn English within school most of the time, there's some countries where English is pretty much the first language. And there's other countries where it's really hard to find somebody who speaks English. Luckily, if English is the language that you typically have all your marketing materials in, most people will accept that and can work with you. But it's something to consider where if you're working with people in a country such as Dubai, or somewhere in South America where they speak, let's say, Portuguese as a first language, it's going to be 20%, 30% harder for you to work with people if all you speak is English. You don't want to eliminate working in a country or raising capital from a country just because you don't speak Japanese or because you don't speak Arabic. But it's going to be one more slight hurdle or one more slight disconnect. Your case studies, your marketing materials might not connect with investors quite as powerfully, so it's one thing to consider. So just to summarize, there's 3 synergies you should always consider while trying to raise capital around the globe. One is geographical, where the different countries you're going to be trying to raise capital from relative to where you're based. The second is regulatory. What are the regulations and the compliance burdens of working in different environments, and how can you work within a framework of countries or cities that have similar regulatory environments? Your compliance costs and your bureaucracy of compliance doesn't go way up by raising capital around the world. And the third synergy to look for is language. Where can you work with people and you're not going to have a huge language barrier? Or if you do, at least consider that barrier and make sure it's worth your time otherwise to be raising capital from that location. Thanks for joining me. It's Richard Wilson, and I'll see you again next time.